Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? This rather bodaciously titled video isn't so much a video response to Runeslinger's video about GM Fiat and player agency as it is a promotional video. I'm going to link his to mine and go watch it because it's cool. However, before you do that right away, go watch mine first because it's my channel and you did click here, didn't you? Runeslinger and I have been having this long, drawn-out conversation about a lot of things about role-playing games as well as other stuff. And, one of the reasons it goes so slow is because we're 14 hours apart. And so we only, communicate a little bit each day if we do it every day. And it's, just for a brief period of time, and it's generally inconvenient for both of us because of the time difference. And we're discussing, things as we think of them, plus, whatever else is going on, what other discussions are, being held around us and kind of reacting to those. And so yesterday we're having this discussion about this topic, and I mentioned after a while, as he clears some things up, I said you should make a video about this. Now conceptually, I could have made the video, but he has more experience with games that offer a different level of player agency, or the scope of player agency is bigger or smaller, and so he made the video and did it in a timely manner. So hats off, good job. I wanted to kind of put my own, spin on this a little bit, and also, there's a conclusion. Maybe it's not a conclusion, but there's a logical place he gets to in his video, but it happens at the end because he builds up to it. I want to put it towards the front because it's really important. And I've also found out recently that it's very important to be clear about what you're talking about, which can be difficult sometimes, as I found out in my probability videos. And that's also part of the discussion, Runeslinger and I were having, as it can be very difficult. Things can be obscure. People can be talking about completely different things when they use the same words. So let me get right down to the meat of the matter. There's a demarcation line in any given game about where's the locus of the control of the player and where's the locus of control of the game master. And that's determined by your player agency. Your player agency, the scope of this player agency is determined by the game designer Fiat. It's only kind of tongue-in-cheek, it's something I just kind of said off the cuff today, but it fits. What the game designer intended in terms of, how much control the players have. Do they have control over the narrative or not? Do they have control over everything their character thinks and feels? Or is there a horror or sanity mechanic or some kind of moral mechanic where there's dice rolls or mechanics that determine, how your character thinks? Do you not have agency over that or not? Is there a point buy, or is it just completely random dice rolls and character generation? Or is it, is it either or? You get to choose. You have like a lot of narrative control over the scene. It's something like Fantasy Flight Star Wars, where you have narrative control over the positive dice rolls, but the GM has narrative control over the negative dice rolls. And so it's spelled out. The game designer Fiat literally tells you what the scope of your player agency is. And that Runeslinger mentions in his video, it's a spectrum. How much how big your player agency, how many things you have the power to make decisions over. It can be different. It's all called player agency at the end of the day, which is kind of a bummer for us, but that's the term we're stuck with at this point. But it can look very different, and it's dependent upon that game design, but it's also dependent upon like what he called the culture of play. And the example that comes to mind right off the bat is say a bunch of us sit down, we're going to play in some game. Let's say it's Lamentations of the Flame Princess because it's me, and we decide, hey, we're going to play a simulationist game. So we don't want any quantum ogres. We don't want to be railroaded. We want everything to be on the table. We don't want the game master to be changing the game world willy-nilly to suit his needs. So we don't want you to fudge dice rolls, etc. That's our culture of play. So at that point, we do have some player agency over the fact that we want to play a simulationist game. If you start changing the deal on us at that point, well, you're messing with our player agency in that regard. However, what happens a lot of times, at least it's been my experience, is two things. You get a case of mistaken identity. Now, sometimes as a player, you simply don't understand, what player agency looks like in this game. You think you might have more control than you do, and I've had this happen in one game I was in. I think I even made a video about it. It's about the guy that came to our Lamentations game, and I think I made a video. I think probably using the Dungeon World mechanic as an example of how to get out of something like that, or a neat idea I had. Anyhow, the guy comes to the game and starts narrating more results than he really should have. and narrating the scene a little bit. And I think it just was a case of mistaken identity. He didn't realize that this game didn't operate like that. That his agency was a little bit smaller, or didn't cover quite as many things. However, we can also, as players, know darn well what our locus of control is and have a different preferred level of player agency and simply be petulant and be mad. And I'll say something cheeky. You can't have something taken away from you that you never had in the first place. If you only had a certain degree of player agency, nobody can take the part away from you that you never had. Can't be deprotagonized if you weren't the protagonist. Anyhow, so that's a very important thing to realize. Is sometimes we do have those cases of mistaken identity, and then definitely Runeslinger's video is worth a watch because he says it better than I do. But he mentions the fact that Fiat can be this two-headed beast. The word literally means like make it so, let it be so, and often it's neutral. Well, it's neutral, but often it's simply the game master, the person being empowered to make decisions, making those decisions. You've got a game like Lamentations of Flame Princess. They get to interpret dice rolls. In many cases, they get to say what happens. In other games, it's different. However, the flip side is when the game master is making decisions arbitrarily to suit them. If we're playing in that game where we decide to be simulationist, and he is deciding that, oh no, the scene goes this way instead, or we're going to change how what the reality of the game world behind the scenes. Well, now he's stepping over. That's bad GM Fiat at that point. But part of the point is what it looks like arbitration. Or what bad GM Fiat starts to look like at this point depends on this demarcation line, and this demarcation line depends on, what our player agency looks like, what the scope of that is, which depends on the game designer Fiat. What was the intent of the game designer, and also it depends upon any kind of agreements or our game culture. So it can be not convoluted, but it can be complicated. And when we start using words like GM Fiat, and which is generally used pejoratively as a loaded term, or player agency, often we're talking about things with different definitions, different scopes. So go watch Runeslinger's video. It's awesome. And that's it. I will talk to you later.